Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Captain Marvel, the Marvel superhero film. That should be a nice, inoffensive topic to grapple with, shouldn't it? He said, knowingly. So for those of you not aware, there's been quite a bit of a fervour online relating to the release of this film, which many have decried as the fall of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and on a larger level, indicative of the fall of mainstream cinema as a whole. And there have been a lot of videos about this. A lot of videos. A lot. And though many of these videos talk about the film itself, many focus particularly on the actor playing Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, for comments she has made surrounding the film's release, and her quote-unquote reputation among the cast and crew. So, with all these videos with such strong opinions about how bad all this is, there must surely be some very credible facts they've dug up that make the level of controversy surrounding Larson and her film all very reasonable. For this video, we're gonna first be looking at what exactly is being talked about, and then afterwards, what it might mean that this is the reaction. So, let's do the first one. Oh, before I go, just wanted to mention that this video is sponsored by Skillshare. I know what you're thinking, typical Jack Saint in his typical Jack Saint style, selling his soul for a quick buck. Well, Skillshare is an online learning tool used by a wide variety of people across a variety of disciplines, boasting over 25,000 classes teaching you skills in the fields of art, business, design and more. It's hard to be surprised over 7 million creators have signed up already. Would you like to learn how to draw lots of different styles of skulls? John Bromett has a class on just such a thing. With an annual subscription of less than $10 a month, it's a great deal for a lot of learning, and if you use the offer code listed below, you get 2 free months of the service. Anyway,
just for once in your life, have a conversation. And after that conversation, while you might not agree with the person you had the conversation with, at least you'll have a better understanding of where they are coming from, and hopefully they'll have a better understanding of where you're coming from. That's what happens with conversation and dialogue. Unfortunately, the far left, the SJW freaks, they're not interested in conversation. They're interested in attaching dangerous labels to you. And I am boycotting Captain Marvel. Now, do I hope to tank the movie as an individual? No, I don't. I don't know what's going to happen with the movie, and I have no control over that. I'm simply saying, me as an individual, I'm choosing not to spend my money on this product because this product is overrun by identity politics and social justice warrior nonsense.
This fellow here is called Geeks Plus Gamers, but for the purposes of this, we'll just call him Mr. Gamer. Mr. Gamer has himself built quite a reputation for being at the forefront of the Captain Marvel and Brie Larson controversies, with over 150,000 subscribers, having produced over 100 videos talking about her and her film. Yes, that is correct. Over 100 videos, all within the last year. So where did all this begin? Well, Mr. Gamer got his start with the more usual comic book fan thing. A lot of reaction videos to superhero movie trailers, maybe the occasional review of a new film or some such. Of course, for Mr. Gamer, The Last Jedi ruined everything. Taking umbrage particularly with the film's director Rian Johnson, Mr. Gamer made it his mission to use his channel as a platform for his sheer dismay at the existence of the 8th Star Wars film. Videos were released such as, Star Wars, Rian Johnson needs to be fired. Will Disney actually fire Rian Johnson? Rian Johnson is just trolling us now. Disney, listen to us. Rian Johnson needs to be fired. And, the most damning of all, nobody wants toys from The Last Jedi.
But something about the way the film was presented just did not make me want to go buy the toys.
Incidentally, this is my favourite thumbnail from this era of Mr. Gamer. Really sums it all up. As conversation about The Last Jedi had started to die down, some would say after the algorithm stopped favouring videos about it quite so much, conversations about Marvel started popping up, particularly about the recent release of Black Panther and its praise as the first Marvel superhero movie with a black protagonist and primarily black cast. Mr. Gamer didn't really have too much to go on there. He did do a video talking about one of its writers expressing interest in how social views have shifted over the last decade, pointing out that while black protagonists have become more palatable to a large mainstream audience, misogynistic multimillionaire businessmen have not. Mr. Gamer responded lustily.
Are you freaking kidding me right now? So, instead of being appreciative of the platform that Iron Man helped build and put Black Panther on so Black Panther could enjoy this success, instead of you just being appreciative of that, you decide to try to connect Tony Stark and his success to your hatred of Trump. One of the main reasons you have the platform you have is because of Iron Man. So instead of trying to use Iron Man to hate on Trump, just be appreciative of the person that helped get you here.
Now, we could go on a nice long talk about this specific video, the notion that this team should express gratitude that a story like Iron Man paved the way for Black Panther to exist. You know, oh, thank you, Iron Man, for showing that a mainstream Hollywood film can star a black man, just as long as it's backed up by 4 other mega hit franchises about white men. Much to unpack, but this video is about Captain Marvel, not Black Panther, so why bring this up? Well, Mr. Gamer is sort of subject zero of this whole controversy, and both his interests and his rhetorical strategies wind up being an excellent representation of many critics in this particular outrage. So this is a good way of outlining them before we get into the meat of things. In this case, a writer expresses fairly milquetoast political views. Donald Trump is bad, and it's good that society has gotten less misogynist. And here Mr. Gamer will interchangeably argue partially that the view itself is wrong, but for the most part not really. His focus is on the identity of the writer, and as such his main arguments will be that it was an irresponsible use of his platform, that it's fiscally irresponsible for him to express those views, and that people don't want to hear the views of that particular person. And to be clear, when we talk about Mr. Gamer or anyone else here, it's only for these purposes, to use as representative examples of this broader movement. I neither condone nor endorse any direct harassment of these people. With that in mind, let's buckle into what I like to call the sins of Captain Marvel. Number 1. The unearned presence of women.
And Kevin Feige, the great Kevin Feige, he's now getting in the situation where it's all about the women. It's all about the women. We have to give you a job because you're a woman, not because you earned it, not because you are the best person for the job, because you're the gender we want to push into these films.
So, as Mr. Gamer demonstrates here, what really flicked on the alarm bells about the film early on was a statement by Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige about diversity. At the 2018 Produced By conference, Feige was asked to comment on the precedent set by Captain Marvel's director, Anna Boden, the first female director across the 20 Marvel films that had currently been produced. When one questioner remarked that it would even things up if the next 20 were all directed by women, Feige responded, "I can't promise 20, but a heck of a lot of them will be." Mr. Gamer rebutted this with a hypothetical, one that I personally love, because it really establishes the thought process here. Essentially, this is going to create worse Marvel films, because now they're not looking for the most talented people, they're looking for women.
Major applause, because hiring the best person for the job, that is not what you should do. You should hire gender.
And it's just kind of incredible, because he then goes on another 6 minutes, still with this hypothetical, and he somehow manages to never move forward to the obvious reply you could make to that statement. Why can't those talented people be women? Because, as we all know, being talented and being a woman are not mutually exclusive terms. You can be both talented and a woman. And the weird thing is, despite the fact that the population is 50% female, and despite the fact that there sure are a lot of women working in Hollywood nowadays, they're still woefully underrepresented in mainstream cinema. I mean, in the example we're just looking at here, Marvel had done 20 films up to this point, and this would be the first female director. 1/2 of the population, but only 1/20th here. If you had 20 apples, that would be like 9 of them going rotten, with the rotten apples in this case being heterosexual men. And the interesting thing is, Mr. Gamer goes on to further push us towards that question of why there would be this dichotomy, by giving a counterexample of the highest paid female fashion models versus the highest paid male fashion models. You see, in this one particular industry, the wage gap is inverted, and Mr. Gamer relates this to a simple matter of supply and demand. Now, I don't know enough about the modelling industry to really say if this is a consequence of supply and demand. I'd probably be more interested that among the rare exceptions to the overwhelming career wage gap in men's favour, one of the biggest ones is the career built around looking nice. But do you see what we're talking about now? We're not talking about female representation among directors in Hollywood. Now we're talking about what might affect the wages in an entirely different industry. What does modelling have to do with directing a Marvel film? Better yet, what does the consumer demand for female fashion models have to do with the consumer demand for female directors? Female fashion models tend to look a certain way, and they're hired based on that. Is Mr. Gamer claiming here that it just happens to be that consumers are saying, good, I really enjoyed the fact that this was directed by a man, and that influenced supply and demand, and that's why all the directors are male? Or are we going back to the false dichotomy between talented directors and female directors, and it's a supply and demand where audiences want talented directors and not female directors? We don't have any answers to these questions because Mr. Gamer is never really interested in discussing why there was this very clear, significant imbalance, which is sort of fundamental to understanding why we would want to correct it. You know, if the tide goes out, it's good to know whether that's because the planet is dying and the sea is disappearing, or just because that's the time the tide goes out. So what we're just left with is this lingering sense. These women directors they're talking about, they didn't earn their way in like the men did. It's fiscally irresponsible. They're getting in the way of supply and demand by giving these jobs to women. As long as we ignore the circular logic of assuming audiences didn't want female directors because the films they watched didn't have female directors. Number 2. Brie Larson's vendetta against 40-year-old white men. Of course, even before Mr. Gamer and company were airing their concerns about the direction of Marvel, one casting choice was already getting everyone in quite a stir after Brie Larson, who had been signed on to play Captain Marvel, said something about social justice.
Earlier this week, USC Annenberg's Inclusive Initiative released findings that 67% of the top critics reviewing the 100 highest grossing movies in 2017 were white males. Less than a quarter were white women, and less than 10% were unrepresented men. Only 2.5% of those top critics were women of color. There is an insanely low chance a woman of color will have the chance to see your movie and review your movie.
In case you didn't catch that, what had happened was Brie Larson had won an award at the Women in Film Crystal Plus Lucy event, a combination of her work in activism and her acclaimed performances in the last few years. While accepting said award, Brie decided to speak about representation, and particularly about how more could be done in the film industry to include a wide variety of perspectives. not just more women, but more women of colour, with Larson citing data showing that, among other things, white male critics make up 67% of top critics reviewing the top 100 releases over the last few years, while women make up less than a quarter, and women of colour an even lower proportion than that. Quite the disconnect compared to the relative distribution of the USA. As pointed out in the report, this leads to funny things like even films explicitly being advertised with a female demographic in mind often being overwhelmingly reviewed by men among the top critics. Going off of these findings, it seems fairly self-evident that the demographics being increasingly catered to in cinema are not getting fair representation among the critics reviewing them. As Larson puts it, if you make a movie that is a love letter to women of colour, there is a chance that a woman of colour does not have access to review and critique your film. In fact, the chances of them not being the critic assigned to that film are about 95.9%. Oof, all these numbers and statistics, starting to make my head hurt. But at least this all seems very straightforward and agreeable. She even clarifies that this was obviously not about her hating white men, just in case. So I'm sure nobody's going to...
Clearly, you just don't want white dudes to have an opinion. You don't want white dudes to go see your movie, right? That's exactly what you're saying. How about none of these white men go see your movie? Well, I can just tell you, and I can only speak for myself, this one's not going to see your movie. Not at all.
So, unfortunately, as part of her speech, Brie Larson made the statement, "I don't need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time." That's a rare treat there, by the way, the actual full quote. For some reason, even in articles directly quoting the video, they tend to leave out bits or just fabricate parts. Now, in context, this seems like a pretty inelegant way of making the point we've already made, that there are films made to speak to specific experiences that aren't getting a fair critical representation, and A Wrinkle in Time being no exception. A film which very specifically speaks to the anxieties of young girls, and especially young girls of colour, with a broad message about empowerment. And I say inelegant because, yeah, if we're being honest with ourselves, it was a pretty awkward way of making this point. It would be very easy to say, twist this into making it look like you're dismissive of what 40-year-old white men have to say about anything, ever, or even that you don't think the opinions of a 40-year-old white man should ever matter at all. And unfortunately, Mr. Gamer is a 39-year-old white man.
Am I allowed to have an opinion of your movie? Because you've already said you don't care about the opinion of white men. And it's kind of funny because so many white men have built this franchise that you have just easily walked into. What about the little boys? Are little boys just not allowed to go see this movie?
Now, at no point was anyone told they weren't allowed to have an opinion about films. Even if we take Brie Larson at her most literal, at most she's saying she doesn't personally care about your opinion talking about one specific film. And when we look at the whole points being made, including the parts where she repeatedly clarifies this isn't about having an issue with white men, the fairly sloppy wording sort of clarifies itself for the simple point really being made. Films are now being made for a wider array of perspectives than ever. Wouldn't it be nice if those judging the films sort of matched that at least a little bit? This is not an attack on 40-year-old white men, unless we presume the reasons that demographic so overwhelmingly dominates media criticism is purely supply and demand too, with nothing to do with the abundant workplace discrimination in decades prior. I would hope Mr. Gamer can at least acknowledge that in the 70s and 80s, when many of these critics were getting their start, women of colour certainly suffered heavy discrimination, and this may influence the positions we see now. You might even say, to correct this historic discrimination, we would need to consciously consider offering more opportunities to non-white male perspectives. But this would, once again, be missing that Mr. Gamer isn't really criticising Larson's actual position. He's arguing with a malformed version of her beliefs in which white men are bad, calling her view once again fiscally irresponsible and unbecoming of her place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
White men have built this franchise that you have just easily walked into and been put on a pedestal. You've done none of the work. You've done nothing to build this universe. But yet you have no problem coming into it and trashing the people that have built this platform for you to get on that platform and talk down to the evil white men.
To bring in our second guest of the evening, this style of argument is best summarized by your friend and mine, the Quartering.
We don't care. We don't care what you have to say about politics. Given the option, you should pass on these questions. Because you are abusing the intellectual property of Marvel to gain a platform, and then you use it instead of being a friend of the fans, who are, unfortunately for Brie Larson, a lot of older white dudes. Why won't you just shut up? Okay?
So there we have it. They've abused this platform given to them by comic book fans to give their opinions on things when asked for them in interviews. All while they could have just refused to say anything because, we disagree with that.
Captain Marvel might have been an amazing movie, but because Brie Larson is an absolute garbage human in real life, I won't see it. And here's the thing. It's really easy up in your ivory towers to say, well, there's just another angry man, baby. Okay, fine. Keep saying it.
For the most part, discussion has, up to this point, at least appeared to centre around specific disagreements with political positions, primarily the belief that extremely disproportionate representation in Hollywood and the media is the result of anything other than, I suppose, the whims of the market. But we are seeing a shift here, just as we saw the shift away from really responding to the things that were being said. A shift from the positions to the individuals making them.
Well, recently, she has now doubled down, as I predicted back in June, that these comments would come back to bite her in the non-existent butt, because Marvel is literally hiring a butt double.
Number 3. Brie Larson's smile and or bum.
Now, I'm not even really a butt guy. I'm more of a boob guy. But, I think we can be honest here that Brie Larson is lacking in the butt department. And you can see a while back.
You ready? Higher, further, faster, baby.
Yeah, we're going to show these boys how we do it. We're going to go higher, further, faster, baby. We're better than the most stinking men's. Of course, it wouldn't be a Captain Marvel trailer without showing just how wooden her face looks. See the aviator glasses on her right there kind of hides her dead wooden eyes. She has this kind of half-cocked smile because she's literally forcing it out. It's like they had to inject like a Botox into her to get like that half a smile out of her right there. That's Captain Marvel way.
Higher.
And then, of course, there's that deadwood face right there as she gets up from the ground from all of that, all of those means and all of that patriarchy.
Weirdly enough, it wasn't long after these very legitimate political disagreements that reactions to Captain Marvel teasers and its production became, some would say, negative.
Let's start with the Super Bowl ad. It begins with Larson's woke friend stating, "We've got to show these boys how we do it." Captain Egomaniac responds with "higher, further, faster," and then finishes with "try to keep up." When she gives a smile, really it's nothing more than a smirk, which I'd say she probably did on purpose. She comes across as so unbelievably pompous in this trailer, and it's probably one of the most irritating and teeth-grinding things I've seen in a very long time. Marvel, what the hell are you thinking?
And if you go along with me on this, it may have had something to do with a lot of these people not personally liking Brie Larson.
So you could live
I
longer,
just don't like Brie Larson.
stronger,
I do not like her at all.
superior.
Among other things, the fact that Brie Larson did not have a large bum was one sudden point of contention. You see, in the comic books, Captain Marvel looks like a comic book character, but in the real world, Brie Larson just looks like a 3D human woman. Strike one there. And to top it off, she didn't really smile very much in a lot of these trailers. Very, very unusual, and almost certainly the result of Brie Larson's poor acting ability, and not because it's quite standard to put a lot of serious-looking hero shots in movie trailers, even movie trailers for Marvel movies. Certainly not because it's an explicit theme of the story that Captain Marvel has been told repeatedly to bottle up her emotions. Again, it all just sort of comes back to Brie Larson in increasingly odd and obscure ways, like the quartering repeatedly mixing up the character Captain Marvel and the actor Brie Larson, almost as if he doesn't realise she is in fact playing a character in a film.
I know a renegade soldier when I see one.
There's that look. There's a look.
Space.
There it is again, the exact same look. The many face of Brie Larson.
Now, is this saying people weren't allowed to be critical of Captain Marvel? Yes, it is. I can't imagine the kind of shameful person who would do such a thing. But I at least hope we can agree, having watched these clips, that feedback might be a little bit tainted by some other thoughts going through these critical minds.
Marvel is getting woke, and we all know the saying, get woke and you go broke.
And of course, this led to 4. Censoring my constitutional right to post my want-to-see rating on Rotten Tomatoes. On February 2019, just prior to the release of Captain Marvel, Rotten Tomatoes announced it would be removing the want-to-see rating, essentially a rating users can put on unreleased films to ideally give a rough understanding of how excited audiences are for the film. Though they had claimed this had been due to a common confusion users had between audience scores and want-to-see scores, leading to the occasional impression want-to-see scores in any way reflected the quality of the film, the coincidental timing of this was exposed for what it really was, an SJW conspiracy to silence differing opinions. Differing opinions on what, exactly? Well, ostensibly about a Marvel superhero film, right? That's what this was all about. These fellows just want to express their opinions about a film, with no ulterior motivations that might make this metric on a film review site a bit pointless.
It really started getting a lot of attention because of Brie Larson's comments. And because of Brie Larson's comments, over and over again, she won't stop with the comments. Over and over. So fans are voicing their displeasure, going, I don't want to see this movie. It was at once a 96%, and then it went all the way down to a 26%. And now it is gone. The ability to speak is no longer there because they didn't like the opinions that were being shared.
Did you notice that there, by the way? Did you notice how Mr. Gamer just went straight from these people aren't willing to listen to opposing viewpoints to Brie Larson won't stop with her comments, and so we will boycott the film? You'd almost get the impression they were trying to use the threat of a financial loss as a means of controlling what others say. Interesting that. Maybe there's a conclusion in it. And as we reach the Captain Marvel post-release zenith, and Brie Larson being brought on to do interviews with the Avengers prior to Endgame, it really was a golden age. Among the highlights was this video from Mr. Gamer, in which he gets very upset about this Captain Marvel poster rewriting the Marvel Cinematic Universe by implying that Captain Marvel came before the Avengers, not realizing that the poster's tagline, "Before the Avengers, there was Captain Marvel," was referencing the fact that the film Captain Marvel takes place before the Avengers. I was also going to show a clip I saw shared all around the anti-Brie Larson communities, wherein a man punches a Captain Marvel toy in a Tesco's with the caption #NotMyCaptain, which I swear did happen, but I can't find it anymore. Luckily, we have something better. The absolute peak, the defining moment of the real, genuine Brie Larson Captain Marvel outrage that actually happened. The one that really captures the spirit of the whole endeavor. Number 5. Brie Larson's posture. In mid-April, this interview surfaced between Chris Hemsworth, Don Cheadle, and Brie Larson. And I don't really think I could do it justice by explaining it, so I'm just going to show you some clips.
But out of this press tour has come some absolutely merciless ribbing. Some of it seems good-natured, while other parts of it seem like there's a general disdain for Brie Larson.
There's no competition for me because I'm the strongest, so it's just kind of like a different...
Well, yeah, should let her think that, but yeah.
It's not. As I've said before, it's not. It's just a fact. It's not a personal opinion. It's not a reflection on what you can't do, but it is also kind of a reflection on all that you can't do.
It's just that you're just not that strong. But she's really smart, and, you know, but should we have a fight?
And she can eat bacon.
I feel like we're fighting right now. I think it's been an all-day thing.
These are just tiny parts. And at the end of this clip, she's literally saying like, I feel like we've been fighting all day.
Like I said, there's been a sort of a passing of the torch, and Brie just has to not screw it up.
Oh yeah, bonus Don Cheadle meme.
This universe.
From the moment, from the moment, look at this. Look at her face. Ugh.
Brie, what was it like joining this group?
It wasn't all flushed out yet with the Captain Marvel solo film either, so it was just...
He does not want to be there at all. Neither does Don Cheadle. It's obvious.
Just kind of finding our way.
Paid properly. And
Still waiting for my membership card that has...
Look at Hemsworth right there. Look at Hemsworth right there. Look at the look on his face.
The initiation dues are paid properly. And
he is so uncomfortable.
Waiting for my membership card that hasn't been received.
$25, yeah. That'll come. The card comes.
But her back is straight, which has nothing to do with not touching anyone. And it's staying stiff, and her head is up. Chin at an angle of domination. I can be just as tall as you. I dominate.
The first film, for me anyway, was like, you know, I thought I was going to be fired most days. Was anyone even going to turn up?
Oh my God. This woman, I think she likes this guy in the brown. I think it's driving her absolutely nuts that she can't figure out how to get him to like her back.
Brie, what was it like joining this group, this universe?
I love that. Just go to the next one.
That's funny. You see moments of disgust from both of them. Like it's an open secret that they don't like each other. He's uncomfortable arguing with her. You see it here. He's looking down. He's trying to make it a playful thing, which probably makes him very attractive to people because he likes to take his sarcasm and turn it into a joke, which idiots can't figure out.
That last one was called Body Language Avengers Endgame and was a video by the channel Body Language Ghost, which accrued over 760,000 views. Body Language Ghost is a body language expert whose aim is to teach people to be able to identify and see deception in body language. And to pull the curtain on that one, no, this person has no kind of accreditation in this subject. As they point out on their About page, there's no such thing as a body language degree. They just sort of know about these things, I suppose. Aside from in this particular instance, presumably, because it turned out that every single conclusion she made about the interview was revealed to be false. Our body language expert made the tragic error they could have not possibly foreseen. When the actors were acting like they all hated each other, they were in fact acting. Brie Larson's posture was not in fact due to a subconscious desire to dominate men, but because a hairstylist had been doing work on her hair during the interview. And it turned out when Brie Larson mockingly tells Chris Hemsworth she's surprised he doesn't do his own stunts and that she thought that was just what everyone did, she was joking.
I
See,
do all
this
my
is the
stunts.
thing. I did my stunts because I thought that that's what everyone did, and
Because
then
Tom Cruise over here.
no, I'll be the first me, not the next Tom Cruise. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Well, now that's an interesting statement to make, Brie Larson. See, I wonder if, now you're giving Hemsworth the business about not doing his own stunts. Now, there's clear photographic evidence of Brie Larson's stunt doubles. So
You literally found these photos from promotional shoots of the film. Brie Larson is in those shots. It would obviously be pointless for her to genuinely try to hide that she had a stunt double. Why would... Oh, I need to sit down.
You haven't seen Spider-Man Homecoming? I haven't seen the Falcon... Oh no, there isn't one, sorry.
Oof, did you see Tom Holland touch Anthony Mackie there? It's like a real fight was about to kick off. So there is the broad strokes of the Brie Larson Captain Marvel controversy. What began as concerns that Marvel was sacrificing the quality of its films for the social justice agenda became a general hatred of Brie Larson for her divisive views, which really aren't that divisive when you actually know what they are. And from there, anything about Brie Larson became a kind of trigger for these fans. Sometimes when I freeze the frame, her face looks weird. This press photo is unflattering. She looked at another actor in a way. And my personal favourite, a video in which Brie Larson, very specifically, is not doing anything.
Like, man, what's going on with Brie Larson? She's actually acting like a decent person in these interviews, and this is like not at all what we expect of her, especially with how she was just acting like a week ago in those interviews with her castmates and stuff. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a fluke. I don't know if she was like told by somebody, hey, people are still making videos about you because you're being an idiot during these interviews.
The surface conclusion is that, as it turns out, despite this being such a massive, long-winded controversy, the criticism of Captain Marvel doesn't really amount to much. Particularly in a post-release landscape, the heavy reliance on threatening Marvel that the film will fail if they kept pushing the SJW agenda kind of fell flat. Despite some desperate last-minute videos about how Disney was actually staging the film's success, it ended up doing very well. So much for #GetWokeGoBroke, I suppose.
$1 billion at the box office. Congratulations.
And, as was always the problem, the stances themselves, that it would be nice to have more opportunities for diverse critics to discuss material that speaks directly to their experiences, that there is currently a massive imbalance in representation across much of mainstream media, were never really argued with. These stances weren't really bad for the stances themselves, or at least that wasn't the focus. It was just that it was financially risky, that it was an irresponsible thing to use your platform to say, that nobody likes you anyway, so please just go away. That things got extremely petty here is demonstrable with any kind of peek into this stuff.
She had to go and try to remove all those press junket videos of her off YouTube.
Right, guys?
Yeah.
Isn't it fun being there for all my extra takes?
Trained you up in the apprenticeship.
Oh my god, I look like such a...
But the real thing to remember here is that the points made in these videos were never really supposed to go beyond flimsy and petty. See, before, we had the fake outrages of games like Cuphead and Doom Eternal, as illustrated by some channels. Situations where there was this impression built that there was a big social justice warrior outrage about ableism or Islamophobia. And you're waiting for me to say, well look, while it turns out those situations were largely fabricated based on extremely small isolated accounts on social media, this Brie Larson outrage was being pushed by dozens of channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, getting hundreds of thousands of views with hordes of commenters agreeing, yeah, I also hate Brie Larson for her hatred of white men, and for silencing free speech, and lying about that stunt double. It turns out the people against the SJWs are the ones getting outraged. But the truth is, it's the same machine as before, isn't it? I can't really say if Mr. Gamer himself really believes in a lot of his criticisms. Honestly, of all these channels I've gone through, he's the one who most seem like he could just be a humble nerd who just wants to drink his chocolate milk and sincerely thinks the world is against him because of Rian Johnson and Brie Larson. But I can certainly tell you that there are a lot of channels pumping out the exact same content he was, covering the exact same Brie Larson related topics, grossly exaggerating her acting, her talking points, her posture in interviews, to further fuel these passionate responses. And honestly, a lot of them seemed a lot less genuine about being upset about this stuff. The fact is, right now we on YouTube are subservient to an algorithm that decides on a whim what you are interested in watching. Right now it seeks out channels that frequently upload, have high watch time, and frequently get clicked on. It just so happens, pumping out this sort of TMZ gossip content about how Jeremy Renner looked at his shoes, which means he hates Brie Larson.
Look at him!
Responsibility. I mean, I am committed to self-improvement, and I work at being the best person that I can be.
This is what appeals to this algorithm right now, because it's a consistent drip feed of content, you always know what you're getting, and considering you can often just repeat your points over and over, or even just make things up if you care to, it's extraordinarily easy to just keep pumping them out. If you happen to open a video about Captain Marvel between February and now, you'll likely be struck by just how many of your video recommendations for the next week will be about Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, Snowflake Meltdown Exposed. It's the Anita Sarkeesian effect all over again. And there's my opportunity to plug Big Joel's video on the subject. So there's that. I'm sorry to anyone who did really feel that Brie Larson said and did some truly awful things in all this. It turns out you haven't walked into an honest protest. I'm afraid you've been pulled into a cottage industry. An industry that isn't really interested in giving you the honest truth about these situations, that really just wants to keep finding new things for a spicy headline to make you more mad about things that it already knows you're mad about. And you'll never really learn more, because if you did know more, you'd probably be less mad, and you'd stop clicking on the links. A few years ago, YouTube had reply girls, because the site and its algorithm had been designed in such a way that this is what was able to flourish. In all likelihood, this too will happen with these flimsy, poorly researched gossip pieces against the hated public figure of the week. It's hard to really predict with YouTube. Until then, it's important to remember that none of these individual channels, be it The Quartering or Mr. Gamer or any others, individually brought anything to these situations. They are, at their core, easily exchanged and replaced. Products of an algorithm currently hunting for copies of easy, reliable content that it's easy to get viewers fired up about. And right now, that market is social justice outrage. And that's quite interesting to think about, isn't it? If we think back to the sort of false arguments about supply and demand earlier, with the suggestion that things like discrimination and inequality can be explained simply by natural market forces, it all links back pretty clearly. Often when this lot are, for instance, made fun of for being quite obsessed with Brie Larson, their response will be, we're just giving the people what they want. And that's the root of all this, really. It's a series of actually quite artificial, oftentimes arbitrary factors that have resulted in a certain status quo that they have found personally advantageous. And the best way to make sure nobody really studies these factors, or dare I say it, criticizes them, is to insist that it's all just the natural order of things. A natural order which, by apparently being natural, means we can skirt around the moral or ethical concerns of profiting off of lying about someone to fuel a witch hunt. You know, if that's just the natural thing. Hello everyone, thanks for watching. Bit of an unusual format for me, but I hope you all enjoyed it. A quick reminder that if you like the content, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share it around on Reddit, Twitter, or your local Discord server. If you'd like to go the extra mile, I also have a Patreon to help fund the show, or a coffee for one-time donations. The Patreon will get you in the credits being shown now. At the $15 mark, you even get your name read out like this, with special thanks to Kalrara, Labour Wave Dashing, Torin the Exile, Industrial Robot, Evie Rosk, A Recusant, with an extra special thanks to Pamphleteer. I'd also like to give a final thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring me with this video. Once again, feel free to use the offer code down below. They like it when you do that. Other than that, thanks folks, and I'll see you next time.
Bloody copycats.